Welcome to Leaders in Lending. I'm your host, Jeff Keltner. This week's episode features an interesting set of interviews because after 2.5 years and over 130 episodes, I've decided it's time for me to take a step back from hosting this podcast and turn over the reins to a set of exciting new hosts. So we'll get to meet them in a second. But before we do, I wanted to take a quick moment and say some thank yous to the people who have really made this podcast possible. I want to start with Alexandra and Ali at the Upstart team, who have been behind the scenes working to make sure that we find the right guests, that I don't sound ridiculous, that we promote the podcast. They put in a lot of work, and I'm really thankful to them for making this podcast as successful as it is. I also want to say a quick thank you to Gabby and the team at Sweetfish Media who produce this, make the audio sound good, take care of my barking dogs and occasional internet lags, and make sure that we bring you high quality content. And finally, I really want to take a minute to say thank you to all of our guests. They are the heart and soul of the show. I've learned so much from all of them. And so I think they've been a big part of what's made the show interesting. It's really, people always tell me it's interesting that you host a podcast. I go, it's not very hard for me. I ask questions. The insights really come from the guests. So thank you to everyone who's participated in the podcast. And probably most importantly, thank you to all of you who listen. A podcast is obviously nothing without its listeners. And I appreciate the time that each and every one of you spend with us on a regular basis. I hope we've fulfilled our goal in providing useful insights and information for you. So big thanks to everyone involved. So we are going to have guests this week. I got a series of hosts. You're going to get to meet Barry and Drew and Ed and Lynn and Matt and learn about their backgrounds. And I think I'm really excited to actually hear episodes with these guys as hosts because they bring a very different set of backgrounds and perspectives. And I think they'll really get to dive into interesting areas and bring their own unique perspective to them. And I'm excited to kind of transition from host to listener, which I really don't do to my episodes, and to actually get to delve into the content with you as listeners. So thank you for your patience and your listening and your support all these years. And without further ado, please welcome our new hosts. Joining me now is Ed, the lending luminary Walters. I love the nickname Ed. The first victim in the new host introductions, but I wanted to start off by just saying a welcome and thanks for joining us. And B, can you give the audience a little background on kind of your history in the lending space and in the banking industry and what it is you're up to these days?
No, great, Jeff, and thanks for having me on. And obviously, I can't start this without thanking the foundation that you've laid in this program and have brought a lot of just joy and information to listeners, and you've got big shoes to fill. So hopefully as a team, we can do that. So a little bit about myself. I have about 30 years in the financial services industry, and I'll kind of break it out into kind of thirds. First third of my industry was technology. I was working in implementing systems, coding, really on the IT side of financial services. So I really got to see that side of the organization. Then the next third of my career was heavy on the risk management side. And so think of stuff like business resiliency, where I got the opportunity to really see a financial services organization across the gambit of all its operations. And so in those types of roles, you really get a sense to see where risks exist. You start learning about inherent risk, residual risk, controls. And it really gives you just like a different lens in financial services that I was really fortunate to have that opportunity, as well as during that period involved in a lot of transformational acquisitions and mergers. And so you see a lot when you go through that activity in your career.
Sure.
And then the most current third has really been around consumer lending and fintech partnerships. I've had the benefit of starting fintech partnerships, being part of acquisitions of fintechs, running consumer lending organizations. And then included in this third is really my time at Upstart, with the role where I'm at today, where as the VP of account management, I have the opportunity to be the executive face to our lending partners, where our team owns those lending relationships with all of our banks and credit unions, and really get to help them be an extension of their leadership team and really help them run their lending programs using our technology. So it's quite enjoyable of getting that access and that exposure to all our banks and credit unions.
I feel like I need to do a better job of succinctly being able to like put a table of contents on my career, because I don't have section A, section B, section C well laid out. That was really interesting and a very wide set of perspectives on a single industry, which is really interesting. Tell me, in your current role, what do you find to be the most rewarding and challenging parts of working with the lenders in the context that you have next? I imagine you see, it's interesting also to go from a single institution and looking on the inside to kind of looking at things across institutions.
Yeah, I'll start with the challenging because it actually bleeds into what's rewarding. So the challenging spot is at Upstart, we are introducing just this new concept to lending. When you think about it, bringing in new ways that are really challenging the norms of how traditional lending is done to the consumer. And as you would imagine, when you're bringing something that's different, that looks different, that feels different, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of misunderstanding. There's folks that see it as a threat to how they have been doing their business and are comfortable. And so what you face is you're constantly having conversations with folks that just don't understand or may be not accurately depicting of what's going on, which can be very frustrating because you feel sometimes you're fighting that battle of constantly trying to influence and change. But however, the most rewarding thing is that in this role, every day I get to talk to bank and credit union CEOs, CFOs, chief lending officers, chief credit officers to talk about the mission and how the new technology is really enabling greater access to credit based upon true risk. And that to me is the rewarding thing, is I'm part of something that's so transformational in how a consumer gets access to credit. So to me, that the biggest challenge also becomes the biggest reward when we see the results of what we're able to do and more people sign up.
Yeah. Well, and I like that. All right, we're going to have a little fun throwback question here, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit personally. What's the first technology you saw? And this is going to date you a little bit, so you got to be careful on how you pick. But that makes you go, that you saw and you went, wow, that's what the future looks like. What's the first one you can remember? We'll give you.
The first one that's ingrained in me is it was probably like the late 70s, early 80s. My dad came home with an Atari computer, and we unboxed it and we put it on the desk. And I just was instantly drawn to it. Coding, and I think it was BASIC was the language, and that to me was just having access and seeing the technology in your home, and being able to just start creating and having kind of this open concept of writing code. It told me that just technology, it just got me hooked, and ever since. Throughout my whole career in financial services, there's always been a technology component that I've either had directly involved or closely related because of just seeing that the technology is just tied to the growth of the industry.
So many people you talk to who end up in the technology space who have this very vivid memory of the first computer being brought home and going, wow, that's like a different thing. And that's really interesting and fascinating opportunity. Love it. So last thing I want to ask you, what are you looking forward to, discussing topic? One of my favorite parts of being a host has been learning from the guests and the different topics we get to cover, that some of which I know something about, some of which I'm really learning in real time a lot along with the audience. What are the topics you're looking forward to covering and things you want to be talking about in the show in the coming year?
Yeah. So, the types of conversations I want to have is with individuals who are not afraid to be bold, that are not afraid to challenge the norm and introduce new things in their organization, even when there's risk associated with that. You think of one of the things is that I have truly enjoyed going from the financial services world of being kind of in-house to now joining the technology world is just that push for innovation and constantly encouraging folks to think differently and push. And I learned so much from people like that. Being around people like that, it's energizing. And so I hope to be able to talk to other individuals that are trying to do significant change in their organization. And then let's talk about where they had success, but then also let's talk about where have they not been successful? Because I think a lot of times you learn more from those opportunities where I had speed bumps. I had a setback. The first time I tried to do it, I wasn't successful. And this is what I learned. And this is how I changed and was able to get it, because that's when people are learning. And I'm hoping to have conversations with folks that have done things like that, because I think it'll help not only myself, but the audience gain value.
Well, it sounds fascinating to me. And I do love the personal stories of both success and I think the bumps along the way, because we do often learn more from those. So I look forward to hearing those conversations. It should be extremely interesting. Appreciate it, Ed.
Thank you.
I am joined now by Barry Roach and Drew Megrey, the CU gurus, as they are known internally. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank
you, Jeff.
So I've been asking all the new hosts to kind of start off by just giving us a little bit of your background in the industry overall and what led you to Upstart. And why don't we, for this one, I'll just start alphabetically in these and go with Barry and go, Barry, tell me a little bit about your history in this space and what brought you here.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So I've been with Upstart for a little over a year now, but prior to that, 30 years in financial services, both banks and credit unions, 10 years as a CEO of 2 different credit unions here in California. What brought me to Upstart was really looking for a little bit of a professional change for my life. I was looking for a new challenge and had done pretty much all I wanted to do in the credit union industry at that time. And when Upstart came along as a partner of a credit union that I was at, there was just something about being on the vanguard of such a substantial change in how lending is being done in financial services, and just a different approach to it using machine learning and artificial intelligence from these sort of crude models that we've used in lending for so many years to get to something that just is just so using such more just better technology overall. It was really, really appealing. And I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be there sort of on the ground floor. Understanding Upstart's not on the ground floor. Upstart's much further developed in terms of the malls and so on. But I just felt it was really something that I wanted to get in on so that I could help other credit unions as they go along in their journey of using new technologies for lending.
And Drew, you get to follow the 30 years in industry, 10 years as a credit union CEO for your CU guru credentials. That's a tough act to follow, but tell me a little bit about your background in the space and your history there.
That is a tough act to follow. We'll divide that 30 by 2. I have roughly 15 years in the consumer space. Started off my career kind of as like that credit analyst role in consumer lending, primarily around mortgages and HELOCs and such during the 2008 financial crisis. So that was an interesting time to get into consumer lending. Then fast forward, I trajected my career in the regional bank space here in Ohio, which I still reside. And then I fast forwarded into being the CEO of a credit union in Northeast Ohio for just shy of 9 years. I came to Upstart in 2021, so I've been here a little over 2.5 years almost. But I, not like Barry, was not partnered with Upstart. Why I wanted to come over is I wanted to get away from the monotony of seeing these same numbers day over day with the organization that I was running. And I thought partnering with Upstart and partnering with their lending partners and seeing different, strategies with different organizations and seeing different numbers would be appealing. And that's one of the biggest reasons of why I wanted to come over here. And the fintech space was something that I was really exploring sitting in that prior role because of the magnitude of size of the institution that I was running. We couldn't do everything in-house. We didn't have the resources. So fintech relationships was something that I started to explore and became very, very intrigued by the whole space.
First, I remember when both you guys joined the team because I remember I was so excited to have people who really had been on the other side of the table running organizations like the ones we're partnering with. I think it brings such a valuable perspective to a team that can be sometimes more technology oriented and not understanding what it looks like to actually be in charge of managing those portfolios or programs or technologies in the organizations. Why don't we reverse the order and start with Drew, but tell me a little bit about what your role at Upstart is. I mean, you guys kind of told me how you got here, but for the audience, like what does your day-to-day look like? What are you responsible for?
Yeah, so day to day, and this is both for Barry and I, we're both on our account management function. And what we do is for those that don't know, Upstart is partnered with lending partners, both credit unions and banks. And our team are the ones that are really in the front lines that are having strategic discussions with CEOs, CFOs, chief lending officers in regards to how our platform and how our technology here at Upstart can fit into the goals and strategies of their organization. And then as we see market trends or different types of trends within their organization, how can we give consultative type insights to what we're seeing on our end to build upon that strategy for their organization to be successful?
Barry, anything you'd add to that since you guys are similar spots?
Drew read straight off the script. No, that was perfect encapsulation of what we do. I will say though that I'm sure Drew has a similar experience. As I've been talking to credit union bank leaders and saying, look, I've been in your seats, like I've done your role. I'm trying to build lending in a way that's not going to upset the credit risk profile that we're trying to achieve. It does generate a lot of credibility for us. And is very useful because we can see it from their perspective and we can anticipate what maybe the rest of the executive team may have in terms of questions, or their board of directors for that matter. Because lending, like, let's face it, with the board of directors, lending may not be necessarily something that a lot of them truly understand. And then you talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning in lending, and it's another realm of understanding. So I think for both Drew and I, having that experience is very beneficial for our lending partners.
All right, so Drew covered the role. Barry, you get to start us off on most rewarding and challenging parts of that role. What has been what are the parts of that you find the most rewarding and then also the most challenging?
Yeah, I just echo what I just said in terms of the rewarding part. I think as we are truly helping our institutions, not just in finding better ways of identifying the true risk of new borrowers coming in, but we're also a component of their AI strategy. Generative AI is sort of a newer topic, I would say, sort of in the broad realm of the public. We've known about it for a long time, certainly at Upstart and others in our industry. But so for a lot of our institutions, it's their first time really sort of partnering with a company who's AI is it's at the heart of what we do. And so being ahead of that and I think is very beneficial for our lending partners. And again, there's that credibility of all the time that we've had with our machine learning models. The challenges with that are trying to explain those models. And I have an academic background in data analytics, and even I've struggled with sort of understanding it from inside with Upstart. But that challenge just sort of drives us to understand a little bit more and be able to explain it in a way that the layman would understand it. That we can take this really, really exciting technology and have our executive teams at our lending partners be able to explain it to their constituents in a way that makes them have some comfort that what they're doing is really the right thing and the right approach for the strategy of the institution.
Yeah, I certainly have found that skill of being able to translate the technical to a lay audience can be almost as challenging and rare, to be honest, as the actual technical skill to build the thing. Sure. In many instances. That's probably true in AI as well, because there's not a lot of AI people, but there's not a lot of AI scientists right now, but there's also not a lot of people who can bridge the gap between really understanding the back end of how that works and being able to explain it to a less technical audience. Drew, anything you'd add more challenging or more rewarding aspects of the role than Barry already hit upon?
To expand on the challenging piece of it, the rewarding I already kind of talked about with being able to work with multiple C-level individuals and discuss their strategies and things of that nature. That of course has been the most rewarding. The most difficult is the constant uncertainty, and maybe not solely derived around AI and machine learning, but just the uncertainty of where the market's at today, how their strategies and goals can be used in the unsecured personal lending space and the auto space, so on and so forth, without knowing, are we going to have a recession? Why is unemployment at an all-time low? However, defaults are at an all-time high. Like the constant uncertainties of conversations that we have with our lending partners. And then, even our peers and our colleagues across the credit union space, it's just a constant uncertainty has been probably the hardest part of our position, I think, in the last probably say 12, 18 months.
I bet every executive at a financial institution would agree, because it's been a unprecedented number of, even for a couple of years, quite frankly, where the degree of uncertainty and mixed messages in terms of some signals looking good and some signals looking bad and things not really doing what you'd expect it's been an unusual time. And I think maybe more noticeable to those with a history in the industry who remember a time when things kind of, looked more than, there were cycles, but you kind of felt like you understood where they were going and what was happening. And I think with the last couple of years, it's been a little less certainty than we're used to, even whether it's good or bad certainty, less of it than we're used to. All right, so I've got a fun throwback question here that for the audience to get to know you guys a little bit. And I guess we'll just start with Drew on this one. But like, what's the first technology you remember that just made you, when you saw it, you just went, wow, like this is the future. Like that's the thing. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that?
Well, I hope the differentiation between answers between Barry and myself also doesn't have the age gap there. But for me, it was hands down the AOL chat room, and I can remember
the AOL chat room. Okay.
The AOL chat room. I can remember the exact moment that my dad sat me down in front of this gigantic machine of a computer in his office, which then, of course, transitioned into that god awful AOL dial tone that everyone remembers all so well. And he showed me the flow of this chat room it was sports. And I was at that moment absolutely mind blown that I could communicate with people across the US or even across the world if I wanted to. I don't know how safe that would have been at the age that I was doing this, but I was super interested in that. And then fast forward to what it evolved to was the AOL Instant Messenger, or AIM. And for the first time in my childhood, I could actually communicate and ideate with my friends, specific like weekend or summer ideas to sell to our parents without our parents listening to that, listening into the conversations on that dreaded corded phone that hangs up in the kitchen. So that's my first technology piece that made me say,
yeah. I still remember my screen name from AIM, AOL, and ICQ. If you were an ICQ guy back in the day, I had a handle on all of them. Yeah. Barry, what do you got? First technology that made you go, wow, this is the future.
Well, I wouldn't say first technology, so because I don't want to date myself, right? I'll even go to one more recent than Drew. So when I started my career, I took the train. I was working in downtown Toronto, and it was like a 45-minute train ride each way. And I had my laptop, and I pull out my laptop, I boot it up, I'd open my CD-ROM and put in a CD, and plug in my headphones that I have to dig out from, in my bag or whatever, and sit there with my laptop and listen to a CD. And then the iPod came out, and it blew my mind that I could just stick it in my pocket, and it was available anytime I needed it. And it had that cool little wheel that you could kind of click around and so on. You remember the first one, right? Man, I love that thing. I think I went through 2 or 3 of them because they didn't last very long. If you recall back then, the battery would go, or, like the quality wasn't quite there. But just to have 1,000 songs in your pocket was just mind blowing for me.
Maybe one of the best examples of product marketing in history, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Like we all still remember that tagline. And it hit exactly on why you wanted the thing.
Yeah.
All right, last question for both of you. I guess, Barry, you get to start this one off. What are the topics you guys are most looking forward to covering in the podcast? I've actually really enjoyed learning about different topics as I've gone through meeting guests. It's been an interesting experience. So I'm really curious, what are the things you're looking forward to covering as a host?
Yeah, I love hearing the perspective of others, certainly in financial services, and kind of what their feelings are about either the economy or the markets at the time, or where technology is heading, and sort of getting through those challenges. So it's kind of what I'm excited about. This is not unlike the discussions that Drew and I have with our lending partners all the time. I'm thinking that we're going to be taking parts and elements of those discussions and actually applying it within the podcast, because, as I'm sitting there listening to a CEO tell me, well, I've got, A, B, and C problems, I bet there's many other CEOs and other C-level people who are having the same problems. And perhaps there's a way that we can sort of unpack a lot of that and maybe even come up with some solutions that 1 or 2 ideas that someone else can apply out for their own challenges. That's really what I'm kind of excited about.
All right, Drew?
I echo that. I don't think any specific topics come to mind, they're going to ebb and flow as market changes, right? But exactly what Barry said, it's going to be exciting to discuss more in depth the trends in the credit union space with other executive leaderships outside of those that are partnered with Upstart. Another big thing, and nothing against you, Jeff, is getting to see how the dynamic of the show is going to evolve with having multiple personalities as different hosts. I mean, we all bring our own strengths and weaknesses, of course, to different parts of our business. But I think seeing that dynamic in the podcast is going to be an interesting and exciting thing.
I am interested and excited to see that as well. We were joking earlier that I don't listen to my episodes, so I get to become a Leaders in Lending listener now, and I'll be curious to see not only how it changes for me, but how the episodes differ from different hosts and different topics, because I think it'll be interesting to follow. And well, with that, thank you guys for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I'm joined now by Lynn, Launch Commander Sautter Beal. Lynn, I feel like you won the nickname lottery, because that is a much cooler nickname than some of the other ones. In my personal opinion, I really like that one.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the nickname as well. So I'm going to take it and continue with the space theme.
The space theme, and it felt apropos to me, given the work you guys do on getting lenders launched on the platform. I feel like that was like not only a cool nickname, but a relevant and appropriate nickname. So I like that one. Well, I'd love for you to just kind of introduce yourself to the audience. People get a little perspective on your background in the industry, kind of your experiences and what brought you to where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. So I lead implementation and customer success here at Upstart. I've been here for about 4.5 years now, which has gone really quickly, but has been a huge time of change from about 250 employees to a peak of 2,000, and not being a private being a private company to now being public, and having multiple products. So my background, I started in the financial services industry about, I guess, close to 25 years ago now, working in a brokerage firm. So I got my Series 7 securities license, my 63, my insurance license, worked in personal financial advising. And then I moved into kind of institutional trading and started really doing a lot more institutional investments. Worked at Smith Barney during the financial crisis. So got to see the brand, logo, and company ownership change pretty quickly over a 6-month period in 2008. And then had the opportunity to join JP Morgan and really worked on a lot of the after effects of the financial crisis. So implementing Federal Reserve guidance around tri-party repo and money market reform, and then a variety of things within the bank, and started doing more technology work. Went back to school, did a master's in data science at Northwestern in 2015, and then moved into leading a data science team at the bank focused on commercial credit opportunities. So I was doing that and had the opportunity to join Upstart. And a lot of people thought I was, frankly, not making a very good decision leaving where I was at the bank. And I got a lot of, hey, see you in a year. And that was now almost 5 years ago.
4.5 years. So that's last laughs on them, I guess. And what is your role at Upstart entail? Like, tell me a little bit more about what customer success and what you guys are like, what that really means.
Sure. So, we have over 100 bank partners now, and my teams really manage a lot of the life cycle with the bank partners. So diligence, working with the sales team and helping prospective bank and credit union partners understand the Upstart platform and product, implementation. So once a lender does sign, team of project managers, program managers, to work with those lenders to get them originating loans on the program. Professional services, if a lender needs more kind of technical help, we need some script writing, some API assistance, that team can help there. And then customer success, which is the one of the relationship management teams that supports our partners, really focused on the operational excellence, compliance, regulatory support, really a number of things that are the kind of day-to-day blocking and tackling to support our partners.
So I'm going to ask you, because I've asked everybody, all the new hosts, what are the most rewarding and challenging aspects of that role from your point of view?
I would say the most rewarding is it is really fun to launch banks and credit unions, and we've actually built into the UI internally confetti, and so
I love it.
the implementation process used to be lengthy. It involved engineering. We've automated so much, and when you hit the go live button, there is confetti that is in the colors of the lending partner's brand, and it's just very fun. And it was one of those little things engineering did for our teams.
Nothing like a
Um,
good launch to make you feel
yeah,
accomplished.
yeah. And so that's great. I mean, they get loans, they're excited, we're excited. That's like peak day. I think the hardest parts are sometimes getting lenders there, and then helping them through problems. So whether it's a regulatory exam that's going roughly, and they're getting a lot of questions, they're struggling to support. Those are the things that are really hard to do and can really be a grind through the process.
Got it. All right. So this is my throwback question that I like for everybody, and I've gotten a wide range of answers. But what is the first technology you remember where you just kind of saw and went, "Wow, like that's the future. I'm seeing the future right there." What for you? Do you have a vivid recollection of a particular moment where you saw something that made you think that way?
I did, and I thought of something more recent, but then I thought of probably really the first time was when we got our original Nintendo, and we got Duck Hunt, and the birds flying across the television, and my brother and I sitting in the living room for hours, like shooting them with the big plastic
It was
gun.
like magic that you could like how does it know?
How does it know? Like we just had got remotes a couple years before that, so it was we had to
Wireless
go.
remotes for the young people. These were remotes with wires because there's no wireless. That's not a thing.
Exactly. So that like video games, like the video games, the Nintendo, NES, Mario, and as that developed, that was it.
Yeah, I love that one. Duck Hunt was like, I have very vivid memories of Duck Hunt as a kid. It did feel like magic because a wired controller felt like something, but you're like, how does the wire know where it didn't make any sense. I've never figured out how they did that. I mean, I can think of a couple ways, but I've never looked it up. All right. And my last question for you, Lynn, what are the topics or types of guests you're most excited to kind of get to delve into in the context of the podcast?
I would say I'm most excited to have some partners on that or lenders that want to think about like how can we help better support your program? What are you seeing in best practices around post-launch support from other fintech providers? And additionally, regulatory concerns. Like, what are you worried about? As so much guidance comes out, there's just such a volume of new information from the variety of regulators. How are you staying on top of it? How are you thinking about staying on top of it? How are you partnering with your fintech on supporting those changes as they come through?
Exciting. Well, I'm excited to hear some of those conversations. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to listening to the episodes.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
I'm joined now by Matt GPT Snow. Matt, I like the nickname. That's clever. I hope you don't hallucinate as much as Chat GPT when you're giving answers. But welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I can't take credit for the nickname, but I'll try to stay out of the hallucinations.
Try and live up to it, right? Well, let me just start by for the audience members who may not be who may not know you, tell me a little bit about your kind of history in the banking space and also kind of what your role is at Upstart today.
Yeah, it's funny, Jeff, like a lot of your guests prior, banking kind of came accidentally to me. I have degrees in math, finance, and statistics. So you might draw the logical conclusion to that. But for me, it took me a little bit longer. I didn't want to get into actuarial science. I actually got an internship into marketing, which helped me see like the creativity and the use of data and analytics. I've always been a bit of a coder. So that started me on that path. I spent a lot of time at larger banks, getting into retail marketing, some loss forecasting, eventually into consulting, and now here at Upstart.
And what's your role at Upstart? Like, how do you work with the team, the financial institutions? Where do you fit in the puzzle?
Yeah, so I lead a team we call Solutions Consulting. You may be familiar in the tech world as like sales engineering. So we help on the technical side, helping lenders understand how our product works in the integrations, but also all things lending. So how do they simulate portfolios and understand what pricing strategy and credit configurations may have in terms of impact to their programs? And then we help them ongoing as well, as they prepare for regulators and remind them the controls they have, how our program works, the insights that help them manage the relationship with Upstart.
It's a fascinating role, I imagine, sitting at that kind of edge of somewhat modern technologies or newer technologies and how financial institutions are using them. I'm curious, what do you find most rewarding and most challenging about that responsibility?
Yeah, you started to hit on it. I think it's balancing that level of detail. So we want to be able to share as much as we can with our lenders without it being overwhelming or confusing. So how do you both tell that overall story and strategy and help them gain the confidence in what we're doing without getting so detailed that it starts to become confusing? So to me, that's what kind of drew me to this role and is most exciting about it. How do you get that really detailed view, but also be able to summarize it in a way that's meaningful for folks trying to run a business?
Yeah, is that both the most meaningful and the most challenging. I think that's two of the new hosts that have said that. That's interesting, and it is a fascinating time, particularly with AI being of such high interest, to be at that intersection of how it's not only being utilized but being explained, being understood within the institution, managed risk, portfolio analysis. I imagine that's keeps you busy with a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely. But I think all of our partners have a good kind of baseline understanding and kind of framework for how they understand the business. So the most helpful thing is just bringing it back to concepts that they're familiar with, and then advancing those topics and getting a little more detailed with how AI just helps bring a little more clarity to the decisions they're making today.
So I want to step away from the today and take you back a minute for a kind of fun question for our audience to get to know our host, which is, what was the first technology you saw that just made you go, wow, this is the future?
Yeah, there's two things I thought about when I was thinking about this question. One, maybe not unsurprising to those that can see the background, was in my college days, and I'm dating myself a bit here, was when the original Napster came out. So the idea that like you could have access to any song at any time, that was kind of like mind blowing to me as someone who grew up in the age of the text-based browsing and like infancy of the internet. Like to be able to share content, I think was really fascinating to me, and especially around music. But really, like today, the thing that has me thinking like a kid again is all around quantum computing. I think we are like right at the edge of something that could be radically changing. If you think about moving from binary thinking to this fully probabilistic computing power, I think could really unlock a lot of speed and capabilities.
That's right. I love the Napster. I remember Napster very well. That's a fascinating moment. And maybe not, we're not necessarily endorsing the business model behind
Yeah.
Napster, but it is interesting because it really was ahead of its time in terms of the interface, the idea of like any song you wanted, anytime, anywhere, and social sharing. That was an interesting moment. And the future very much looks like what they predicted. Just, we pay for it now.
Yeah, it's a little more legitimate than those days.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, like, what are the topics you're excited about covering as a host, and guest? What are you looking forward to learning about or discussing in the context of the podcast?
Yeah, I think, as broad as the topics that people want to cover, I think what's really exciting about this format is just learning from each other. So, coming into it with an open mind to see what topics are concerning to our partners out there, as well as getting maybe a little more deep into the data, infrastructure, technology, how those things advance decision-making and the struggles people have around security, privacy, and balancing, the advancement in moving these technologies forward that we know help our consumers and how they think about those challenges in their organizations.
Exciting topics. I can't wait to listen to some of those episodes. Matt, thanks again for taking the time and joining us today.
Thanks, Jeff.
So I hope you all enjoyed getting to meet the new hosts. I think they're a really exciting bunch, and they're going to really bring this podcast to a new place. I think explore some different areas with some different perspectives. And I hope you all enjoy listening to the new episodes as much as I will.